So the goal today is to be given an array, and then we want to return another array of length 2. The first number will be the number of times we encountered a positive number, and then second number will be the sum of the negative numbers. So essentially what I would start by doing is I would have a variable of type integer, and that would essentially store the amount of positive numbers that we found in the array, and that would be, so I'm going to call this count pos, and I'm going to set it equal to 0, and then I'm going to have another integer array, or actually another integer rather, which is going to store the sum of negatives, or let's just call this neg sum, okay, and that will be equal to 0. And I'm going to have a for loop, and I is equal to 0, I is less than, in this case it's called input.length, and I'll increment I by 1 each time. And in here, if input of I is essentially greater than 0, then I know that the number is positive, and so I'll increment count pos by 1. Otherwise, right, and so, well, I could say otherwise, I could say if, and I'm going to say else if the input is less than 0, then I know that the number is negative, and so I'm going to essentially have neg sum will equal what neg sum was before plus the input of I, so I'm actually going to add it onto the accumulator pattern. And after it's all done, I can essentially at the top here, I can say, okay, int new array is essentially equal to new int length 2. And then the first element in new array at 0 will essentially be count pos, right? Well, I could just say new array is equal to, I could do a couple things. I could say new array at 0 is equal to count pos, and new array at 1 is equal to neg sum. And then of course I can just return the new array and see if I get a favorable output. Seems like I forgot to add a, so it seems like we've passed the tests, but we want to optimize. So I would say that we don't actually have to specify if input of I is less than 0. Here, if input of I is greater than 0, then we want to increment count pos by 1. But if it's not, then I don't have to specify. I can just say that it's either positive or negative. So I'll just say otherwise, neg sum, and instead of saying neg sum is equal to neg sum, instead of saying neg sum is equal to what neg sum was before plus input of I can instead just use the shorthand operator here and say neg sum is equal to what neg sum was before plus the input, and that's sort of the shorthand operator there. And since I'm only having one statement inside these for loops, or actually these if inside these if else's, I don't actually have to put sort of braces around them. And so I could do it just like this. And if I run this, I think I'll be fine. And another thing that I want to note is that I think instead of initializing new array like this with a given length, I think I can just say, okay, well, new array is equal to, or I could say int new array is equal to count pos, right? Maybe, and neg sum. I think, yeah. And then if I return neg sum just like that, I think we'll be fine as well. So you see how we're shortening our code down. And I think instead of using a for loop, I think I can use a for each loop, right? So I can say for int input, right? And then I can say we're going to increment, or we're going to look at the input array. This would help. I think that would shorten it down as well. if the input is greater than 0, right? Or if the input is negative, or just add, right? So I think that would work here. Right, so I actually have to use the variable I instead of input. Input refers to the array. So I think that also shortens it down considerably. And I can have these sort of yeah, so I think that works. I think that works out just fine. I think another part of this was to return an empty array if the length of the array was less than 0 or something like that. So if the input.length is equal to 0 or the input equals null, then we can just return int something like this. Yeah, I think we just return int. I think this would work. Yeah, I just have to say new int actually. So yeah, this was, and then I think I can, instead of having it like if I is equal to 0, I can say just like this. Otherwise, do this, right? And instead of returning new array, I can just say return new int. Right, so I guess we've shortened it down to sort of what it was before. I think if we go back and what we had, I think before was a little too long, right? All right, cool.